Good morning. So mean to make me follow a trained professional comedian. I'm going to be the sort of serious bit. My name's Helen Marriage. I run Artichoke, which is the producer of Lumiere Durham. Many of you will have seen it. Apologies if we put barriers in front of your house or you can't get a taxi. But 160,000 people have picked up the free tickets for Durham this year, which is such a gratifying thought, given that we planned it in the pandemic, when it was never certain that we were going to actually be able to do it, and suddenly to see all those families and people out on the street having a communal experience is really, really important. So, when I talked to Herb about this talk, he asked me to do two things. One was to talk about my local connections, which is very pleasing, because I know I sound like a soft, shandy-drinking southerner, but I'm not. And one was to talk about Lumiere. So, this is me drowning in the middle of an event, by the way, just in case you wondered. So, my local connections. This is my grandfather, Thomas William Bevan, born in Spenamore. His parents died before he was 5. He was brought up by his married sister in a miner's house. He was an extraordinary man, and actually it was Herb asking me to do this that made me find this. It's published in a book called My Primitive Methodists. Which he definitely was. He was one of those sort of hellfire and damnation. I remember hearing him preach. He was really frightening. But he was really passionate. He was a socialist. He wanted to be in Parliament, but he couldn't afford it in those days, so he went into the church. And this was his way of spreading the word, both about his faith, but also about his commitment to social and political change. This was in his obituary, which was published in this Methodist magazine. I laughed when I read this. He often spoke in the Methodist conference and not seldom aroused considerable disagreement. He was, however, always heard with respect and affection, not least by those who did not share his opinions. And I thought, oh, that's where I get it from. That's interesting. So funny. So the second thing Herb asked me to do was to talk about Lumiere. So like my grandfather, I'm going to ignore him completely, and I'm going to talk about Artichoke and the other work we do, and the fact that our work is informed by 3 words beginning with P, and they are people, place, and politics with a small p. So Artichoke started way back in 2009. No, it didn't. It started in 2006 with a production called The Sultan's Elephant, which is notorious if anyone saw it. It took me 7 years to negotiate the permissions to close the roads of central London, these roads with which I'm sure you're familiar. The roads that are called the ceremonial route, that our roads in our country are dedicated to shopping and traffic. That's what we think is really important. Interrupting any of those things is considered totally illegitimate and not something that should be encouraged. This is Horse Guards Parade, which is where the military do their changing of the guard. And I had this idea that actually we didn't need to be about shopping and traffic. We needed to be about a communal art experience that would unite people in the most extraordinary way, bring people together, create a sense that London, this incredible world city, belongs to us, not to the cars, not to all of the things that we're used to seeing there. So we work with this brilliant French company, Royale de Luxe, who specialize in doing enormous sagas with giant people who come, they invade your city for a few days, and for a moment in our lives, everything is different. So, beginning of the show, a giant rocket crash lands into the area outside the Athenaeum. I'm going to move out the way because I can see people straining to see. And no announcement, no, this is art, no, buy a ticket, no, this is a production by Artichoke and Royal Deluxe. Just a thing happening, an event. And then out of the rocket emerges a little girl who's come to stay for a few days, like little girls do. And to meet her is a time-traveling Sultan aboard his elephant. This is his time-traveling machine. And this is what happened. This is 9 months after the 7/7 bombings, when people were really frightened about being in public space. But here they are. Here's she doing what you do when you go to London, which is have a bit... You have to imagine, I won't go into it, but the logistics of making this event happen. You can see how dated it is, because nobody's got an iPhone. You see, they've all got cameras. Little girl meets little girl, most glorious moment of tenderness. And this is when I decided that my life from this point on was dedicated to the idea of putting art into public space, which, although we don't talk about it, it's a super political act. It's about returning the city to people. It's about saying, as Alfie was just saying, we're all creative. We all understand this creative instinct. And this is the closing day. This is 1 million people on the streets, just marveling at what the magic, the imagination of an artist can do. Very strange thing happened after this. The Arts Council rang me up, Arts Council England, who fund lots of art in Britain, and said, if we gave you more money, could you keep doing this? I was kind of going, you never say that. You always have to apply for money, and you always say no. So that's what created Artichoke, the success of this show, the bravery of doing it, the negotiations with all the public authorities who just kept saying no. And this Bright Ideas Gathering, I'm going to give you one tip in life, which I have learnt from this process, which is that they did say no for 4 years. They just went, no, we're not doing this. Why would we do this? I went to a meeting after 4.5 years. I was really fed up. We were having these conversations, endlessly going on and on. 25 men in a room, lots of them in uniform. They run central London. And they were going, so Helen, what is it this time? And I said, this thing that we've been talking about for all this time, it's happening on this date, and I really need you to help me. And everything changed in the room. It was really interesting. The woman taking the minutes wrote down the dates, so that meant that it was happening. And everybody in the room tacitly accepted that somebody else must have said yes, including me. And I realized that I was asking the wrong question. I was asking them to legitimize what I wanted to do. But none of, the bus planning manager, the guy who runs the parking meters in central London, none of them felt they had the authority to say yes. By not asking that question, everyone stopped saying no. Nobody said yes. They just assumed somebody else had. You can get your way every time. So moving on, this is a piece that we did with the great Sir Anthony Gormley. If I do this, you know who he is. This is what he wanted to do. In central London, there's Trafalgar Square. Who's been to Trafalgar Square? Only one person in the room. Okay, you've all been to Trafalgar Square, probably. This is called the fourth plinth, which means that there are 3 others. Who can tell me who's on them? I've asked this question a lot. Nobody ever knows the answer because, like the statues that you walk past on your way up here, they're just furniture. You just go, oh, there's a statue. So it's 3 dead military figures on the 3 other sites. You can see them here. Nelson in the middle, generals on horses. And the fourth plinth is a platform for contemporary art. And Anthony decided that he wanted to put a person on the plinth every hour for 100 days and nights. That's 2,400 hours. You have to imagine what you were doing 3.5 months ago, and then imagine running a show, which is what I was tasked with doing, without an interval, every hour, different person on the plinth, 4 rules, 1 person, take with you anything that you can carry, 1 hour, nothing illegal. Ha! So here's Anthony predicting that everybody would sign up. 35,000 people signed up. This was our publicity campaign, trying to get people to want to be in it. This was the very complicated computer algorithm that meant that if you entered, so 35,000 people enter, there's 2,400 slots. We pull like a lottery, like a postcode lottery. And this is what we did. We represented every single part of the UK, right up Shetland and the Orkneys in the top, North of Ireland, Wales, everybody, in direct proportion to the centres of population. And here's the first person going up. Here's me at the bottom having a discussion with our production manager about how it wasn't going to go wrong, was it? It is. And here is what you saw, this portrait of Britain with people deciding that they wanted to articulate their hopes, their fears, their political campaigns, everything that they wanted to do was encapsulated in that 2,400 hours. If you go online, there's a little film of it on our website, but also if you go to the British Library and the Wellcome Trust, every hour is digitised and you can pick any one. There's loads from the Northeast. I think somebody from the Northeast, a radio journalist, actually ran his radio show from the top of the plinth. It was just completely wonderful and mad, and this is us taking down the safety netting to show that it was all over. So you can see it's about politics, it's about place, it's about people, it's about giving people a way of expressing themselves. So this was a piece that we did in 2018, which was for the part of the 1418 Now celebrations, where we worked, again, we crossed the whole country, we did 100 workshops 12 weeks long in all of these places to try and get women to understand the history of the suffragettes and the way in which they had articulated their political feelings and their way of wanting to express themselves. The suffragettes always used to say that they made banners because it expressed on the outside what people were feeling on the inside. So we ran these. So these are the ancient suffragette banners, 100 years old. And they were the first people, interestingly, to know about marketing. So they were the first people, before the political parties, to have uniform colours. So the green, white, and violet give women votes that you see in all those ancient campaigns. That's what we imposed. That was the only constraint we imposed. So here's their workshops, and here are ours. Women expressing themselves through their creativity, like Alfie was just saying, you know, all these people coming together, understanding that we talked about the history of suffragettes, about the power of voting, about their ability to express themselves. Some were really expert, some were really new. And I haven't got time to show you this film, but you can see it. And then on the day, just as they did 100 years ago when there was a procession from Kensington to Hyde Park to protest the vote, here they all are, very dangerous. You can see how many policemen are needed to control this lot. That was them. In the 4 capital cities of the UK, that was them. This was us. So fantastic. Tens of thousands of women coming together to articulate their concerns about the future, to commemorate the history, and to occupy public space. It was a really joyful, amazing day. And we got 2 hours live on BBC One. So that was kind of amazing. And we dressed them all in green, white, and purple scarves so that they became a living human flag. My vote really makes a difference. And finally, I'm going to whisk you through the last, one of the projects that has cost us the least and was the most powerful. Here is a political map of the United Kingdom and the island of Ireland. So we were working in Ireland. There's a place of real tension. This is in the 1970s. There are tribal factions, both religious, political, social. It's a very complicated place, and I'm not going to spend time explaining to you all how the 450 or 500 years of history plays out on the streets of Ireland. But in this slide on its own, you can see there's a city called, depending on which side you're on, Londonderry or Derry. And this is not history. This is what people feel, that their identity is being denied in some way. This is in the city. This is an enclave, a Protestant enclave called the Fountain. You see the red, white, and blue flagstones. This is on the other side. This is a Catholic or Republican area commemorating the civil rights and the fighting that went on. And this is what happens every July the 12th. Kids spend their summer holidays building these. You hear about bonfire protests. This is a bonfire. This is built over days and days and days. It's pallets, and then they fill it with the insignia and memorabilia of people that they hate, and then they burn them. And they're right in residential areas. It's really a sort of aggressive assertion of community identity. And I thought, has to be a better way. They're so good at burning bonfires. Let's do something that is positive and changes the values. So I turned to the Nevada desert, where there's this festival called Burning Man, and invited the architect of these extraordinary temples to come to Derry and to make one with the communities. And we spent months and months and months recruiting from both sides of the political divide, unemployed teenagers, people who had carpentry skills but weren't in work. And we put together a series of workshops. We taught CNC cutting, we taught carpentry, we taught turning up for work on time, we taught trusting the people that you're working with skills. We hired this amazing warehouse, everyone came to work. A dad said to me he hadn't seen his teenage son before 4 o'clock in the afternoon for the last 18 months. That kid was on our doorstep every morning at 8:30 waiting to have a go. It may have been because one of the Californian artists said to him, that guy with the beard at the back, Said, do you know what this is? Handed him a nail gun. And he said, yeah. And he said, just climb up that ladder and start nailing this together. And he went, me? Yeah. And so there was this amazing trust that was built. And then on the top of the hill, which is a place that is considered no man's land between a Catholic area called Top of the Hill and a big Protestant housing estate, it's an area of some violence maybe, we decided to build it there. Everyone said to me, don't do it there because it's too dangerous. And I said, but look at the view. Catholic cathedral, Protestant cathedral, our temple. This is the beginning of 426 primary school kids who came up to write into that structure their hopes, their fears, their losses, their grief. It was the most beautiful thing, made by local people, constructed and designed by David Best, the amazing artist, and his crew. This place that everyone said to me, nobody will come, 65,000 people came. They wrote in it. They loved it. They kept saying, but why are you going to do what you're going to do to it? And I said, it's carrying so much beauty, so much hurt, so much grief, so much everything, that it has to be really hard to let go of. And so on the Saturday night, we ceremonially burnt it in front of 15,000 people. And it has changed forever what people think about working together in that community. And that's my favourite slide of all time. That's Durham, Sadler Street. And that little girl is like the point of it all. That's it. Thank you. Never do what I'm told.
So first of all, thank you for telling us the backstory and for sharing, because I knew very little about all the other projects you worked on, which were amazing and are amazing. But since you avoided my question about Lumiere here, just tell us a little bit about the backstory about how it got started, because it's not an obvious place for something like this to be happening here, and especially now, it's easy now at the other end of it, you're seeing it so embraced by so many people, obviously not just in County Durham, but in the wider region and further afield. But, it began in a series of conversations when it must have been like, what on earth are you talking about?
Yeah, so we were originally talking to Cambridge, who was celebrating the university's 850 years, and they were just so difficult. Just kind of, why do we need you, blah, blah, blah. And then a friend up here said, think about doing something in Durham. So I knew it because not only my grandfather, but my mother was born here. She lived in Shadforth. I used to come up all the time. I came up on the train, and I got off. If any of you got off on the train, you look down over the city, and I looked down and I thought, oh, I know what to do. That would be amazing. So we went to talk to the council, the cathedral, the university, and the prisons, because I thought they would be like major stakeholders. And I said, the thing is, I just want to do this thing. I want to turn the city into a giant outdoor art gallery. People will wander about, and it'll be really beautiful, and everyone will love it. And they kind of went, what? And that famous question, people always ask, the English particularly, always say, what is it in aid of? Like, I hate that expression. Are you raising money? Is it to commemorate? And I was just going, like with the elephant, it's just going to be amazing. But in Durham, nobody did the thing that in every other city people have done, which is say, why would we do this? They basically said, why wouldn't we do this? Mm-hmm. It's hugely disruptive. It takes us 18 months to plan. What you don't see if you wander the streets is we've got above the library a huge CCTV suite with fire police, ambulance, emergency planners, all of my production people watching. We're watching you all moving, and we're going, oh, there's a crowd over there, we need to move these stewards. It's like the most complicated thing, and because Durham doesn't naturally lend itself, tiny city built to keep people out, to inviting, 200,000 people in, it's really, really complicated. Mm. And particularly COVID and other things have made it more complicated this year. But what was so clear is that the community, those stakeholders and others, wanted to put Durham on the map in some way, trusted me and us to create something unique that everybody could be proud of. And the determination of the council, particularly, and the Arts Council, to keep it free. 160,000 tickets, I could charge everybody a £5, I'd be fine. But we don't, because we want families who you saw on the streets last night to come in with their kids. We don't want there to be any barriers to understanding that art and the imagination of an artist it belongs to everybody. And I suppose our fundamental belief here, particularly, is that if you can momentarily transform a place physically, you can forever change the way people think about each other, themselves, the place. And that's the aim. And Durham has been uniquely, in my experience, cooperative, helpful. When I turn up now, they go, "So what's it going to be this time, Helen?" And I go, "Oh, that's nice," as opposed to, "We can't do that, that's not possible." So Durham, for me, apart from my family connections, and I think about my grandfather and I think, would he approve? Oh, God, would he hate me? Apart from the family connections, it's become like a second home because of the welcome and people really loving what we do.
Well, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Cheers.